Welcome to my channel. Today, we're going to discuss a fascinating yet alarming topic: 10 countries that might disappear from the map in the coming years. Yes, that's right. There are nations around the world facing serious threats, whether environmental issues, wars, political crises, or even economic disasters. These countries could literally vanish from the earth as we know it. So, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any content like this. And if you enjoy the video, don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let's dive in. 1. Maldives. We begin our list with the Maldives, a true paradise in the Indian Ocean. The Maldives is famous for its white sandy beaches and crystal clear waters, attracting tourists from all over the world. However, it faces a grave danger: rising sea levels. This country is made up of around 1,200 islands, many of which have an average elevation of just 1 meter above sea level. Imagine that if ocean levels continue to rise, much of these islands could simply vanish underwater. The Maldives is frequently mentioned as one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. Scientific reports suggest that by the end of this century, if greenhouse gas emissions aren't controlled, the archipelago could become uninhabitable. This has already led the Maldivian government to take extreme measures, including considering purchasing land in other countries to relocate its population. Scary, right? Have you ever imagined that one of the most sought-after tourist destinations in the world could disappear? 2. Tuvalu. Now, let's move to Tuvalu, another small archipelago in the Pacific Ocean, which shares the same tragic fate as the Maldives. With fewer than 12,000 inhabitants, Tuvalu is one of the smallest countries in the world, but that doesn't protect it from environmental dangers. The issue here, too, is rising sea levels, which are causing erosion and saltwater intrusion into underground water sources. The few fertile lands that remain are being devastated, and agriculture, already limited, is becoming nearly impossible. The reality is that Tuvalu could completely disappear in the coming decades. Some islands are already experiencing regular flooding, forcing residents to relocate. The government has been making diplomatic efforts to secure the possibility of relocating its population to other countries if the worst happens. Recently, the country has been discussing with New Zealand the potential to move its citizens there in search of a safer future. Incredible, right? An entire country forced to relocate due to climate change. 3. Syria. The next nation on our list is Syria, a country that has been suffering from a devastating civil war for over a decade. Since 2011, the conflict in Syria has turned the country into a battleground, where millions of people have been forced to flee their homes. But beyond the internal destruction, Syria is also politically fragmenting. Today, there are several armed factions controlling different parts of the territory, and the influence of foreign powers such as Russia, Iran, and the United States is further dividing the country. The situation is bleak. The economy is in ruins, the country's infrastructure has been decimated, and millions of Syrian refugees are scattered across the world. The question remains: will Syria manage to rebuild itself as a unified nation? Or does the country risk disintegrating into small independent states or areas controlled by various political and religious groups? Syria's future is a big question mark. 4. Kiribati. Kiribati is a small island nation located in the Central Pacific, consisting of 33 atolls and islands. Like the Maldives and Tuvalu, Kiribati is seriously threatened by rising sea levels. The constant increase in global temperatures and the melting of polar ice caps are raising ocean levels, putting the survival of these low-lying islands at risk. The government of Kiribati has already begun preparing for the worst, purchasing land in Fiji as a preventive measure. The idea is that if the country becomes uninhabitable, they could transfer their population to this land abroad. The problem is that Kiribati doesn't have enough resources to fight against the forces of nature, and if sea level rise continues, it could be one of the first victims of a phenomenon affecting the entire world. 5. Lebanon. Lebanon is a country facing a crisis on multiple fronts. In recent years, the nation has been overwhelmed by a series of economic, political, and social problems. The financial crisis that began in 2019 devastated the Lebanese economy, with the currency collapsing, hyperinflation, and rising poverty. The devastating explosion at the Beirut port in 2020 dealt a harsh blow, leaving the capital in ruins and amplifying the population's suffering. In addition to internal problems, Lebanon is caught in a web of sectarian tensions and external influence, especially from Iran and Saudi Arabia. With a population divided between Christians, Sunni Muslims, and Shia Muslims, the country struggles to maintain political stability. Many experts believe that if Lebanon cannot recover from this multifaceted crisis, it could fragment politically, with different regions controlled by sectarian factions. 6. Marshall Islands. The Marshall Islands are also at the forefront of the fight against rising sea levels. But besides this problem, the country bears the scars of a tragic past. It was the site of nuclear tests carried out by the United States in the 1940s and 1950s. These tests left some areas of the islands highly contaminated and uninhabitable to this day. The inhabitants of the Marshall Islands face a double threat. On one hand, nuclear contamination continues to affect their lands, on the other, rising sea levels are slowly swallowing their islands. If the global climate scenario does not change, the Marshall Islands could completely disappear in the coming years. If you're finding this content interesting so far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. It helps me a lot to keep bringing videos like this one. And, of course, share it with your friends so they can stay informed about these important topics too. 7. South Sudan. South Sudan is the world's youngest country, having gained independence from Sudan in 2011. However, since then, the nation has been devastated by internal conflicts. The civil war that broke out shortly after independence has resulted in tens of thousands of deaths and millions of displaced people. The country remains mired in a severe humanitarian crisis, with widespread hunger, lack of basic services, and a stagnant economy. The South Sudanese government struggles to maintain control, while armed factions continue to vie for power and territory. If instability persists, there is a risk that South Sudan could disintegrate or be absorbed by neighboring nations. 8. Nauru. Now, let's talk about Nauru, one of the smallest countries in the world in terms of both area and population. Nauru is a tiny island in the Pacific that was once extremely wealthy thanks to phosphate mining. However, uncontrolled exploitation led to the depletion of natural resources, leaving the country in a precarious economic and environmental situation. With the collapse of its phosphate-based economy and few alternative economic options, Nauru faces an uncertain future. Moreover, the environmental degradation caused by mining has devastated much of the island, rendering many areas uninhabitable. The lack of viable economic development options and geographic isolation cast doubt on Nauru's survival as an independent nation in the long term. 9. Yemen. Yemen is another country suffering the consequences of a brutal civil war. Since 2015, the country has been embroiled in a conflict that has killed tens of thousands of people and created one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. Besides the war, Yemen is facing mass starvation, disease outbreaks, and a completely collapsed economy. The conflict in Yemen is complex, involving local factions as well as the intervention of regional powers like Saudi Arabia and Iran. If the war continues, Yemen could end up fragmenting into regions controlled by different armed groups, and the idea of a unified country may become impossible to achieve. 10. Fiji. The Fiji Islands are a famous tourist destination in the Pacific, but they are also feeling the growing impact of climate change. Coastal erosion and rising sea levels are already forcing the government to relocate entire communities to safer areas. Fiji has been trying to adapt to climate change, investing in sustainability programs and seeking international support. However, if sea level rise continues, the future of these paradisiacal islands will be at risk. And these were the 10 countries at risk of disappearing in the coming years. Each of them faces serious threats, whether from climate change, wars, or economic crises. It's frightening to think that entire nations could simply cease to exist, isn't it? So, what did you think? Which of these countries do you think is the most threatened? Or do you know of any others that could be on this list? Leave your opinion in the comments, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends. And of course, turn on notifications so you won't miss the next videos. See you next time.